Good evening, everyone. My name is Danny Le, a Santa Clara City librarian, and I am here to introduce this amazing graphic novel anthology. Our stories carried us. Our stories carried us here. It's a graphic anthology from Green Card Voices that collect and compile immigrant voices from all across the nation, from all walks, about dreams, difficulties, and also triumphs. And we have two special guests today to talk about it. We have Dr. Craig Moodie. He was born and raised in Kingston, Jamaica, and loves being surrounded by the incredible culture of his homeland. And after completing high school, Craig began contemplating his future. And through the encouragement of his aunt, a dean of admissions at the University of the West Indies, Craig decided to pursue a degree in liberal arts at Macalester College in the United States. After graduating Macalester, Dr. Moodie attended the University of Minnesota and earned his PhD in neuroscience. Dr. Moodie continues his neuroscience research at Stanford University, working in the Department of Psychology and leading major medical research programs at the Stanford University School of Medicine. And we also have Julie Vang, who was born and raised in the Dakota land of Emizakas, known as St. Paul, Minnesota. She is the co-author of Our Stories Carried Us Here and graduated from the University of Minnesota Twin Cities with a bachelor's in family social science and a minor in Asian American studies. Julie is a queer Hmong American with over 8 years of policy and programming experience. They are committed to creating an alternative narrative of healing and justice beyond the struggle, but a narrative that has the power to liberate, unite communities, and make our ancestors proud. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thanks for having us.
Well, we're just going to start it off because there's a lot to learn about Green Card Voices, as well as the work and also more about Dr. Moodie. So Craig, can you tell us briefly about your journey that was detailed in your chapter of Our Stories Carried Us Here? And a little bit about your childhood in Jamaica to your experiences coming to the United States.
Sure, yeah. And just want to start by saying thanks for having me, Danny. Thanks for having us, the Green Card Voices folks and myself. I think that this is an incredible journey that we've been on together, and it's been a beautiful journey, right? And I was very humbled when Taya and Julie asked me to be one of the contributors to have my story told, pairing me with Anna, who was an amazing illustrator. This all was just fantastic. So I just want to say thanks to you, Danny, thanks to you, Julie, and to the Green Card Voices. So yeah, for me, it all started, back in the 80s. I'm an 80s baby in Jamaica. And so we'd gone to the US a lot when I was growing up. I had an aunt who was a nurse in New Jersey, another one who's a nurse in Baltimore, DC area initially. So we'd go visit them, and my family would always thought that, maybe we'd move to the US one day. So a lot of my mom's side, they were all up in the US, and my dad also had family, sisters, etc. in the US. And so, we kind of always thought that that's a possibility, didn't really think of it as something real, and so in terms of that being like the next move, we were just kind of happy in Jamaica. My mom was a pharmacist, my dad was an accountant and business owner. We kind of had a nice life. Like, we were middle class, and in Jamaica, being middle class, there's a big middle class, and it isn't a stratified. So it's a lot more relaxed. And one of the things I really love about Jamaica, and I try to touch on in the book, is that it's a very multicultural society. Our motto is out of many, one people. So, we have Asian Jamaicans, African Jamaicans, native Jamaicans, everybody kind of from all different backgrounds, who have been there on the island for many generations, who all speak Patois, which is our native language. And so, growing up for me, it was beautiful, idyllic in a way, to be honest with you. We had the Blue Mountains, we had the ocean, all the fruits, and kids playing in the streets. So, some of those stereotypes are very true. We see those, videos, or hear reggae music songs, when they talk about, Jamaica being amazing. It really is. And it's something I try to hold on to. But, we're a small country, and we don't always have every opportunity. And, while we have a big middle class, there certainly are things that are not idyllic, right? So there is poverty, and there is crime, but like everywhere else, I guess. And for my family, they wanted to see if there are opportunities that they could get elsewhere, including in the States where we already had family, like my mom's side, or my aunts and stuff. And so my dad decided that he wanted to move the family up. He got a job as a teacher in New Jersey, and my mom, my sister, and I were in Jamaica for a while, for a few years. Well, he was going back and forth, then eventually fully immigrated to the US. And then in those few years, I was recruited by this program for gifted youngsters. And at first it was all about like speed reading and stuff and study skills and blah, blah. But then this guy came from the school called Macalester. He was the first American recruiter I actually ever met. And I was like 14. And he's like, hey, have you guys ever thought about doing something outside the core curriculum? So that's like the British system where you choose a faculty right away after high school. So at 18, you kind of choose the rest of your life. You go into the law faculty or the medical faculty, whatever. And so, I had an opportunity to go into med school right after high school. So it's a kind of a combined course where you skip college, but you go right into a professional degree, but you go for longer. And I just wasn't ready to make that choice. And plus my mom and sister wanted to move up to the US. So when this Macalester recruiter, Jim Crowder, he came down rather to Jamaica to ask us about considering US schools. I said, sure, let me see what Macalester is all about. I checked out other schools, but actually I ended up going to Macalester because it was the first one, maybe it made a big impression, but also was a great school. Turns out that was in St. Paul, Minnesota, right? So went to Mac, as you kind of just said, found neuroscience and psychology there. And, I'm very grateful for that because that's what set me on my career path and never look back. But, also met a lot of great folks, lived there for the 4 years of college, did a year running an outpatient facility, then moved to the East Coast to Boston and New York for a few years, went back to Minnesota for my PhD, then came to California in 2014 to work at Stanford, and worked there for 5 years. And now I work for a drug design company that's trying to pioneer precision and personalized medicine, which means, we design therapies for people only for those who need them. And we're trying to make sure we have higher efficacy, lower side effects, basically, going against the mold of traditional pharma. So that's something I can really get behind and, use all the training I've had over the years for that purpose. So yeah, so that's just me in a nutshell, just kind of bounced around a few places, but I've been in the US 20 years. And actually, as just saying before we started the panel, that even though I was featured in Green Card Voices when I was in Minnesota before I finished grad school, and then now again in this anthology, I actually just got my green card. So my wife and I are very happy. My wife, Katie, she's on the call too. And yeah, it's been a long, long time coming, and we're very, very happy that, this actually culminated now kind of right as the book was coming out, that, I got to the end of that journey, which is kind of ironic but poetic.
That, in a nutshell, that is your story. And it's really encapsulated in this graphic novel beautifully by the illustrations and the storytelling that you put into the panels. Now, as we were talking about before you came to the United States and you saw those opportunities that were presented to you, and when your father left to build his business and soon after immigrate to the United States, did you feel any apprehension coming? I know that because you did have a great life in Jamaica, but what were some of the concerns and that were kind of connected to many people who talked about their childhoods in the graphic novel, that they had concerns leaving their home country to come to a new place? What, if you could remember what young Craig was thinking, what were those concerns like?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I don't have to think very hard. I still remember because unfortunately, some of the things that I dreaded came true. So what had happened was my dad left initially when I was 14. The next year, he offered to bring the three of us up. So me, my mom, my sister, and my sister would have then transferred, I think, into elementary school in the US. And I would have finished my last 2 years of high school in the US. And I said no. I emphatically said I didn't want to go. My mom actually decided to delay the three of us moving up so I could finish high school in Jamaica. And there were a couple of reasons. A, I was like, it doesn't make any sense to just try and transfer now. It would have been a huge culture shock. I said, let me at least finish high school. I'd already, met Jim Crowder from Macalester. I was already kind of thinking about the US, kind of bargained with them. I said, let me just finish and then move up. But if I'm being honest, it wasn't just that I wouldn't be able to finish high school. It was that I would leave everything I knew behind and everybody I knew behind. And, I thought that especially if we all immigrate together, there's going to be less opportunity. And, to kind of think about, what one of the things that did come true is I was stuck in Jamaica, actually, right in the beginning of COVID. And maybe we can talk about that a little bit later. But I was there for over a month. And the irony is that in the last 20 years, almost 20 years, I left there in, I think, June of 2002. So I'm just months shy of 20 years. In all that time, that was the longest I'd been in Jamaica contiguously over that month plus, which is just kind of crazy to me to think about. If I think back all those years, I would have never wanted that to be the case, but I kind of figured it would, and I think for me and a lot of my other expatriates, immigrant friends, one of the concerns is you leave life behind and you never get to have it back and you never get to go back, right? Mm-hmm. Really. And when you do go back, you feel like a stranger, right? So I think that was a big concern. And unfortunately, it's something that came true. And now I'm trying to go back at least once every year. I'm trying to be more frequent and more intentional. But yeah, no, it was very much a kind of losing a life I had, knowing that I wouldn't ever have it again. But, I gave it up because I saw that there were things ahead that were also exciting. So that made that choice.
Very brave of you to, understand it at a young age, that there is a possibility for more for yourself. But because of, your educational aptitude and also the, coaxing of your family members who saw potential in you, did that also usher you quickly into the realities of America? Also the racial implications and as well as the attitude towards immigrants in this country. Did you face some of that? And I think you did mention some, but as you grew, went along in your educational studies and living in America, did you face a lot of that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a heavy question. And, I think that overall, I've been able to make moves in the US that, in spite of the way that people perceive me, that I've been successful, but it didn't come without some trials and tribulations. I think that even from when I used to visit as a small child, there were things that were, hostilities, words that were used, attitudes that people had that were very obvious. And there were a lot of things as well that were kind of what I now call, or when I know to be microaggressions, right? That I didn't notice. And that continued even in college. So I went to Macalester, as I mentioned, in St. Paul. It's a private liberal arts school. There are 90 countries represented. So in that liberal bubble, I didn't really see, at least amongst my friends, we were all just people, and that's how it was in Jamaica. So I was like, oh, it's just the same. It's continuing on. But when I left that small bubble around Macalester, I went out into the greater Minnesota, that I realized, that there were people who didn't really appreciate me being in certain spaces. And, there's some things that, especially when I moved to Boston, I, for instance, was arrested for stealing my own car. And, that's just one of the times where I realized very blatantly, what it was like to be driving while black, be a black man. It doesn't matter if I was in school out there, it doesn't matter what I'm doing, it was just the reality was you can just be pulled over for no reason. And even though I had all the documentation, they didn't care. They weren't listening to me. So stuff like that, has happened. And I think one of the more proximal things that I deal with, I worked at Stanford for a long time. We just actually had, I think it's fall back, right? So in terms of daylight savings, and so it gets darker earlier. And that's why things, especially, being in academia, going to work and then coming out after 4 or 5 and it's already dark. And it doesn't matter if I was on a panel, if it doesn't matter if I was in Stanford Medical School, like leading a study with a bunch of, like famous professors or whatever. If I walk out the building of my lab after dark, I'm still just a big black man, right? And the way that people are apprehensive, the way they kind of tense up when they see me, that's kind of a trip, because the juxtaposition, right? Like during the day, I'm not doing this thing, and then at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, right? My perception. So, I've just tried to work to not let that get me down, and believe that my own self-worth is not determined by these people's perception or reaction, right? But, definitely happens. And you just have to kind of decide for it to not wear you down, because otherwise it could.
Like one of the anecdotes in your chapter in the graphic novel that made me sad, but it's just the stereotypes, given to Jamaicans often, in that you were swimming in the pool, right?
Yeah.
And you were swimming, and yet, chlorine gets in everybody's eyes, and makes it turn red. But you had individuals who kind of called you out, whether thinking you were, smoking more marijuana,
right.
But also wearing a hoodie, things that are associated negatively on Black Americans and Black people in general. And it's sad to think that you can't walk out of the institution you work at Stanford, without having somebody based on skin color judge whether you belong there or not. And I think that reality is what we're trying to make in the point in this amazing graphic novel, is that though people have made amazing lives for themselves, gone through adversity to get to where they need to go to support themselves and their families, they're still being judged here in this amazing country of opportunity. And you kind of answered one of my questions was, do you, if prejudice is still felt in your professional life and in those little circles and enclaves, do you feel like you still have to, defend yourself and other, I guess, professionals from other countries who,
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that that's actually a separate answer I give, which is that, there's something that I brought this up with you, Danny, just before the call started, which is imposter syndrome, believing that even though you worked really hard to get where you are, that you don't really deserve it. And I tell you, I still feel that every day. Literally every day. I was on a call today with a bunch of execs, and I'm what's called a subject matter expert. So I know a lot about neuroimaging. I've been doing it for over 10 years now. So I know to run an fMRI scanner and analyze our data, publish on it, blah, blah. I've actually built tools that are now widely used in the field. So for that reason, people do listen to me. But, it feels weird sometimes. And sometimes I feel like I have to defend myself and my ideas more than colleagues, who don't present the way I do, right? That's a reality. And it's been a reality every step of the game to get where I am. And even I'm sure it will be a factor going forward as well. So it's one of those things I've had to just resign myself to, unfortunately. But, I think that it's a mixed bag. On one hand, yes, there is opportunity for advancement for people to listen to me. But, there's no free lunch, right? Like, I mean, there's that other side of it, which is I do have to push harder and say things more than once, for people to listen to me, if they do at all. And that's just the game, I guess.
I think you're doing great, man. So we're listening to you loud and clear. And I'd like to segue, into how did you get involved with Green Card Voices? I think this is for all the people in this book, the opportunity to share one story in storytelling in a visual form, which is a graphic novel, pretty amazing. It's growing in popularity. But how did you get hooked up with them?
Yeah, no, good question. So I have to say that honor of the connection goes to a couple of Macalester friends who actually were involved with them before I was. So Andrew Gordon, who's actually on the Green Card Voices board, and Eliza Rashid, who has been a longtime collaborator. They are two wonderful, amazing folks. They've had their stories told. They've been profiled by Green Card Voices as well. And, in just conversations about other immigrants, Matea was trying to start up this nonprofit and get, as many like stories, like varied stories of immigrants, these folks recommended me and vice versa. I said, if I was interested, that I should get hooked up with Taya. And all at the time, they were also doing a collaboration with a class at Macalester. So it was a collaboration between Green Card Voices and the students in this class who were profiling immigrants and their stories, their hardships, etc. So yeah, this was I think back in 2012 maybe, so a while ago, 2012 to 13 maybe. And yeah, so I was working with them from then, just through the word of mouth, and I have to say I've been blessed to have this connection. I've talked about Green Card Voices so much and how important I think it is that there are narratives that kind of counter a lot of the anti-immigrant, especially anti-Black and brown sentiment. And especially even before Trump, but especially in the time of Trump, I thought that they were doing such and are doing such important work.
That's amazing to hear that actually you've been involved for a long time, which leads me to talking with you, Julie. Can you tell us more about the origins of Green Card Voices and actually your involvement in the organization?
Yeah, so hearing Craig, right? He's literally been at the root and the foundation of Green Card Voices. Like, we, as a whole, as an organization itself, we weren't established as a nonprofit until 2013. But beforehand, it was just like capturing first person narratives of immigrants themselves, as opposed to someone else than themselves sharing their own immigration refugee story. So that's really how the organization came about, because there was a need around it. Right? There are so many immigrants and refugees in the community, but there wasn't a preservation or archive of just first person narrative specifically for them. So it wasn't until immigrants themselves, like Taya was one of the person who was hired to work on the Green Card Voices project. At the time, it was a lawyer. It was two immigrants working together who were lawyers, and they were working with their clients who were Green Card Voices, who had Green Card Voices card. And so they wanted to expand their work beyond just client work and bring this out into the community. And that's where the nonprofit was really established as a group. And from there, it was just all about recording. So going out to communities, going and partnering up with colleges, like Craig mentioned, right? Working with students and partnering up with high school. So it was a lot of like working with community and students and teachers, professors, to see if they would love to support us in this work and just record immigrant story. And then from there, when we were partnering up with some high school, some teachers mentioned that what can we do beyond than just recording first person stories of immigrants? Because at the time, the organization was just using 6 open-ended questions, right, during each of their recordings. And some teachers wanted to do more than that. And they found that we needed books that can represent students and see themselves be represented as they're reading. So this is also like literacy for them. And so teachers worked with us, and we had this brilliant idea of like, we have no clue about publishing books, but we wanted to make this happen. And fortunately, the community has so much resource, and we were able to easily partner up with communities who were immigrants themselves as well to publish. So for example, our first book was published in 2016 with high school students. So that was focused on Minneapolis, a high school in Minneapolis, all immigrants. And so from there, we wanted to continue the momentum. And so we went to different cities to work with high school, partner up with them and their community to publish more books. So from there, we have 5 different youth series from different high school in 7 different states. And we also wanted to branch beyond than just students themselves. We wanted to focus on entrepreneurs, right? Immigrants are so versatile and so diverse. And we wanted to focus like the vast and diversity of immigrants and where they're at. So we're like, we have to go to entrepreneurs. There's immigrant entrepreneurs. There's also immigrants who are in STEM field.
Mm-hmm.
And the mission and the vision of Green Card Voices really is about amplifying first person stories of immigrants and refugees, yet also bridge the gap between immigrants and their community.
Mm-hmm.
So then we can foster empathy. And so then we can move further away from fears and xenophobia and prejudice, in that we can come together as neighbors and get to meet our new neighbors and welcome them with whole open arms.
Mm-hmm. Amen. It's just the amazing thing is this. It started from a very kind of grassroots inspiration,
Mhm.
and I'll say this: I work in books. Publishing is not one of the easiest things to get, and as a writer myself, I've been entertaining the idea of publishing my own books for a long time, but it's the thought of, because you're doing it independently, which is a big undertaking. Most people have to work on a manuscript and pray a larger publisher or independent will read it first, accept it, maybe give you an advanced, and then put it out into the public. You guys wanted to be an independent publisher, which is most people would say that's a lot of work and money, and the returns might not be in terms of a capitalist society, profitable, right? But how was it with the first? Because now this graphic novel is your 10th book. How was it during the early years publishing those first few books, and to build that momentum? And as you said, the community started reading and seeing these books, seeing their stories. And how was that response to push you to continue forward?
That was actually one of the biggest momentum for us as an organization. Was we knew how difficult publishing was because we have no expertise or experience in it. So we had to rely a lot of it with our community. And knowing that this was such a necessary tool to have a book in classrooms, teachers were educators as a whole was one of our biggest advocates. And so they would like go out there, talk to school boards, talk to other professors and teachers, to organizations, to say like everyone needs to know about Green Card Voices, purchase books. And quickly we were like just well known by itself through word of mouth and the grassroots of it. And we won awards for our books. Like our first few books were each have an award for it. And because we now have I would say like we have mastered the publishing side of things, we like publish 2 books a year now. And because of that, a lot of the funding we receive from grants, we receive them through crowdfunding, from online source donation from our community. And that's really, it's been developed. Like everything which is why we're proud to say like this is really co-creation work that we're doing, because this journey, it's not just about immigrants themselves. This is about all of us uniting together to make sure that we have inclusive and diverse practices and tools and resources for our community, for our students, for our generation, for each other. And so now that we have really mastered publishing, and it wasn't until around the time I came around, which is around 2019, where we had a huge contract with a distributor in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where they were able to, because every time we print book, right, their store inventory wise is stored in our small little office and it gets piled up. And we manually we sent them out ourselves. We mailed them out. We packaged them and then we mailed them out. But we were approached by a huge distributor that is global, actually, where they were able to store our inventory and support us with marketing, support us with resources around publishing further books, and just making sure that immigrants have a platform for publishing and having their books out there. So now it's less pressure on us now with inventory wise, that we have support globally now.
Definitely, I know Craig would agree. You got to stay the course of this journey, and opportunities, or those who can see you and believe in you will want to support you. And just hearing you, Julie, kind of explain and this is not the end. I know you all at Green Card Voices do podcasts, and you write up articles. You do so many other things with the storytelling platform that is expanding. I know publishing is just one arm of it, and the most important thing is that what you mentioned was these books are tools for our educators. These are tools for our people, our students, those who look like us, who want to be empowered. They're going to read this and be empowered. And that's some of the amazing things. My next question would be, like, as you are creating more books, and as you tell, it's 2 books a year, you might grow even further. Has earning the trust of the people to tell their stories became easier? Were people in the beginning apprehensive? How about you, Craig? I would ask, like, was it easy for you just to say, yeah, let me share my story, or you're like, well, I don't know. How are you gonna, represent it? Is it gonna be okay? Is it gonna look good? Who's gonna draw it? What were some of the thoughts that went into, asking people to share their stories on a larger platform?
Julie, you want to go first? Okay. Well, I'll say in terms of being asked, I'll say this now because, as I just mentioned, I just got my green card. But even before I got it, just briefly, I was stuck in Jamaica after working for several months trying to get this O1A visa. It's based on merits, for people who, for instance, are trying to get like H1Bs, which is one of the visas that Trump was trying to make more scarce. And so I wasn't able to get H1B, got the O1A provisional approval from the State Department. And when I mentioned being stuck in Jamaica and beginning of COVID, the initial reason was that I had that denial for that O1A. And I was really pissed off that, the consular officer in Kingston Embassy, the US Embassy Kingston, could, just mess with me like that, right? And I came back, and even though I hadn't gotten the green card yet, I got an email, or I think a call or an email from Taya from Green Card Voices saying that, out of all the interviews they'd done, that they really enjoyed talking to me, that I'd want to feature me in a longer length, this like a graphic anthology idea that they were kind of percolating. And I was like, I'm in, I want to tell the story because, I think people talk a lot about illegal immigration, right? And the politics around that, but they don't realize how hard legal immigration is. Like, it's really hard. It's expensive and it's very precarious. People get denied all the time. I almost didn't come back to the US a couple of times. And so when they asked me the second time around, I had just come back from a very precarious position. I didn't have my green card, but I said, look, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to tell the story. I want to tell all of it. I'm going to tell the story of what the consular officer did to me, even if at risk of my own green card, which I at that time didn't have, right? But I was like, to hell with it. I'm going to tell the story because it needs to be told. I think that people deserve to hear how hard it is for people who are trying their best to do things right. And even if it comes at personal risk, I trust Taya and folks to represent me properly, and they did an amazing job. Anna, my illustrator, was just phenomenal, and Julie and Taya were so amazing. But yeah, I did actually honestly think about what if, this book got popular enough that, people in the consular section of the USCIS, which is the government agency that controls immigration, what if they saw the story and it negatively affected me? And I said, that's a risk I'm willing to take because I want the story to be told. So, it was kind of a trip, but I don't regret it for a second.
Julie, how is it like working with people and voices like Craig's in making sure that Green Card Voices is representing not only their narrative but their future in the story that they're going to be telling in these books. That it bringing them peace of mind, but also faith that there's a good reason why these stories should be put down on page.
So I do want to emphasize that not right. We have master publishing, and we're recording and emphasizing first person story, immigrant stories, but the whole process itself is very intensive, and it requires certain people to be on board, to have this like trauma sensitivity to a lot of these stories. So, for example, when we record the story, right, Taya, our executive director, goes in, who has a PhD in oral history and who's done this work intensively with listening with the mind and the heart, going into these spaces, being very intentional and thoughtful as she's recording these stories, right? So then we're also intentional about how we go about coming into these spaces and what kind of like open-ended questions we even ask Teal. And so typically what happened is we would send these questions ahead of time. So students or those participants would take a look at them and see how they want to write this up or think about it, as opposed to like freeze up, when they are recorded. And a lot of them have never shared their stories with anyone before. So this can be a very difficult process for them, if especially they really want to bring this out into the world and let people know like how difficult their journey has been, and also the beautiful moments that they have captured and have carried on. And so we have all these like forms that they fill out, right? There's like multiple like back and forth conversations that we have. Even after recording our stories, we have some of them, right? Once we record them, we transcribe them verbatim, and we make sure that their words and the way that they speak are authentic. And so we don't take out words and refill them as like how professional or academia has put in writing and stories for us. We're unconventional, and we're bold, and we're moving away from that, from a very multi-ethnic, multi-diversity way of sharing our stories. So we're really mindful about that whole process, which is right. We truly care about the whole entire process and making sure that if any given time, if our participants are feeling very hesitant about their story, or they're unsure about how to share their story, we find different alternative ways to make it happen. So for example, if some folks, we typically have a portrait, like a full color portrait of our storytellers, and some of them would want to not have their portrait be up, and they want to remove the identity and just share their story authentically. So we'll have like an illustration of them or so. So we'll find ways to make it work so that they can share their story out there to the world.
Definitely what you're telling me, and what I love about this process of you guys developed is they are a part of this creative process with you in creating their book or their chapter or their narrative to the public. They're not only just being recorded, they're like, no, I have an input and say. And I think in the nonfiction arena, especially in the place of biography and memoir, the fear is to tell your story authentically. But the fear is if you say it too truthfully, you might hurt somebody or hurt yourself. I mean, there's been techniques that, as you know, that changing names, locations, yeah. But what I love about this is because the intentions of these stories are meant to help find solace for those who identify in these narratives and spaces, that you help them. If this is not the way you want to be told, to be told or shown, how can we still share it without having to edit or make it unauthentic to that person? I love that. I love that so much. And the big thing is, this is a graphic novel, your first graphic novel. after 9 books, you went the route of a graphic novel. Was there fear in publishing this, because it wasn't just text-based, it's now illustrations. And how many people, almost 16 or more individuals from just the storytellers and illustrators from all over the world. You compiled everybody from across the globe for this graphic novel. Was there, a lot of fear going into this project and making it the best it can be, or you felt like you had a game plan ready to go?
We knew that graphic novel was definitely a genre we wanted to do. And after going through and recording and sharing story and being, publishing books from all over the state here in the US, we knew it was finally time to do a national collection, and no better way than to have it in a graphic novel. And first of all, I'm sure, Danny, you can attest to this, right? Graphic novel, what we have researched on our end is that it's the highest circulated genre in libraries. So when we think about our educators and our students, we knew this is like perfect for them. Like all my nieces, like that's all they read.
Yeah. Yep.
And so, yeah, we knew this needed to happen.
You're not lying when it comes to high circulation. Since I buy graphic novels for our adult collection, I'll always peek when I'm like front row at my reference desk, and right across is the wall of graphic novels. I'll see adults, teens, young adults of all ages, old, young, gingerly walking around, not trying to make sure they're seen. But after they start getting into it, I see them start making a pile. And I get so excited, I have to walk over. I'm like, so what are you reading there? And I'm always surprised that it's a very varied pile of comic books, like superhero stuff, to mythology, to nonfiction. And people love nonfiction. I think a lot of our books get circulated and cited in academic papers because they're researched really well, whether it's, World War II, immigration, or about a person's life. It's pretty amazing in the graphic format. Nobody, they'll pass up on reading a regular biography, but graphic novel, they're like, sure, I can do that. There's footnotes in this. And it's amazing because I think I blazed through this in less than about an hour. It didn't take me too long. I felt kind of cheated that I was done already. But I think I learned about nearly, over 16 people's lives, from the illustrators and the storytellers, and about their brief lives in those countries to America. And I now share this with my organizations in my library who help new immigrants, who help people who are still learning to navigate the English language and to readjust into their new home. I shared it with those leaders, and they said, this is a great resource that we can use to share with our students. So at least here in California and Santa Clara and San Jose area, you're doing good work already. And I'm an advocate for that. So
That's amazing.
yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm going to ask, like, now that you got this first one, then are you planning on doing more?
That's definitely in our plans. So Danny, exactly what you just shared, that's what we want for readers. All right, that within a few hours that they already know at least like 10 plus new neighbors or new friends just from this graphic novel by itself. And the great thing is that it's both story with illustration, with text, right, and illustration to it. So it's not just meant for a one-time read. It's like you get sometime in your own time. It's like go back and kind of do more analytical view to it, right? Which is why that's kind of our emphasis, is that after one read, the next thing is to go through the illustration a little bit more deeper and think about the style and the creativity that was brought into this, because every story and illustration is unique in its own way. And the beautiful thing is that with this graphic novel, we were intentional about pairing the storytellers and illustrators from the same linguistic, cultural, and regional background. So we're not having like a random like a illustrator from like Idaho, right? drawing a story from Cameroon, who have no clue about each other's lives, right? We want to be very intentional with the match, where the storyteller feels comfortable in sharing their story without having to do so much emphasis, like details and everything, where it's like, oh, I know, I get it, I've seen it. I may not know fully, but I have a great idea about it. I'm sure that's something Craig can even share a little bit more about his experience with the your illustrator Anna as well, how that was.
Look at that.
Yeah.
That's Craig right there. You know,
Yeah.
I
Yes.
mean, look at
That,
looks so great and handsome. That's crazy.
thank you. Yeah, no, I'll just say very briefly, Julie, to echo what you're saying. That was really powerful. I remember the first time we met, Anna and I, we have a great rapport. She's Dominican, so from an island in the Caribbean, so me being from Jamaica, even though she's from a Spanish speaking country and I'm from an English speaking country, we have that shared Caribbean heritage. And actually, even here in the Bay, I'll meet Puerto Ricans and Dominicans, and they're like, look, I feel closer to you than I do to like Mexicans because like we're Caribbean folks, so that we have that shared culture, right? And I think that's so interesting. And, when I was working with Anna and like she had listened to the transcript or like listened to the original recording from my interview I checked, it was actually 2014, the first interview. And then she like gotten some other resources and we chatted. And the first time when she showed me the panels, the sketches, I was blown away, because she took stuff from what I said, from what, that information she'd gotten off professional history, family history, whatever, pictures I sent to her. And then she kind of created and crafted it all into this like beautiful, like kind of expose of me. And like, it was really a trip because, I didn't expect her to just really do it in such a way that I was like, that's exactly what I was saying, right? When I saw it, I'm like, that is exactly what I was saying. And she did a great, great job. And I don't think anybody else who didn't have that shared history, could have done that. I think, the care that Green Card Voices took in at least my pairing, and I'm sure in other ones as well, was extremely, extremely effective and made for, to me, something that I thought was a beautiful product.
By by the great work you Green Card Voices done, especially in the graphic novel format, comic book format. This is how we are getting a greater readership of all ages, understanding one another's story in a very honest and human way, where empathy is shown in full color, and great visual understanding that is expansive, magical, but real. We're magical people, but in this way we can then see those ideas flow through the page. Just as we're wrapping up, Craig, I know this was a small little sliver of your life, but I honestly think you have a memoir here, buddy. So have you ever thought about a full book about? Because I really want to. I feel like I need to know the minutia of your journey because it sounds very exciting, and like all these stories, these are all slices, and I felt like there's so much more, but they did it in a very nice, short way. But I would love full books of all the people in the graphic novel. So have you ever thought of it, man? I mean,
Yeah, that's very humbling. Thank you so much for saying that. I think that I'll be very, very honest. When I read the book, even before when I'd heard about other contributors, I think there are so many stories in there that are so compelling. I would say, honestly, even more than my own. Like I've had my own triumphs and tribulations, and I'm honored that, they're being showcased a little bit. But really, there's so many great stories in there. And I think to answer your question, there's a lot more, Danny, that I want to accomplish in my life. I think that as we were talking about before we jumped on this call, that we just gotta be on this path and try. And even if it's, not necessarily like clearly cut out for you, maybe that's the fun in it, right? And for me, one of the things that I've kind of muddled through and realized is that, I care about people and I care about access to especially health and mental health resources for people. I've been doing things that I've already made a difference, which is awesome, but I want to make even more of a difference. I think once I've achieved what I want, then yes, I will tell the whole story. So yeah, maybe one day.
I respect that. A lot of people often defer to later in life, which makes sense. Me too. I don't think I want to tell my full history yet. I'll wait for a few more accomplishments. But I definitely think you're good. You're there, buddy. So don't worry about it. Definitely, Julie. What's next for Green Card Voices in your work? Maybe this coming year. If you can tell us.
So you mentioned about graphic novels. So we do have a graphic novel coming up in spring 2022.
Woo!
I know, but this one, it's going to be different. It's going to be our first children's book.
Yo, that's a hot market. All right. So let me know when that drops, because you already know we're ordering. So
so that's in the work right now. And then this graphic novel is seriously taking off. And so folks are already, blowing this up into a art exhibition, programming around it, and having a curriculum built in with this book as well. So we're also expanding this graphic novel even further.
awesome.
So that's really the next plans for Green Card Voices. And for anyone who's like interested of purchasing a copy, and if you haven't got the chance to, like Craig's story, it's literally just a glimpse of it. Like you got to finish the whole story and actually see like the whole illustration. It's so magical, like what Danny has mentioned. But the story itself, there's so much different nuances in there that you don't want to miss out. Right? Today is really just a taste of it. But yeah, this is really just a taste of it.
It's just a sample, folks. So for those who are right now listening and watching later, please go pick up Our Stories Carried Us Here. Amazing. I guess first taste of your Green Card Voices work that will be continuing on for more and more. I'm ready for a whole shelf of these books to spread. And if I hope that y'all do make it out to the West Coast and meet up with Craig here. Hopefully we can, as a library and other organizations, support you in that mission. So if you need to do a live talk or connect with organizations that can help your mission, do not hold back from bugging me and anybody else that can get into the fold, because that's what Craig has mentioned: access. Creating that entry point for people to be enlightened and educated on their own volition without any barriers. And that's what we're here. We're not trying to hold back people from being able to see themselves in these shelves. I'm rapping now. What? So, I'm just excited. Before we, kind of end it tonight, any shout outs or, call outs you want to make for the people?
Yeah, I'll say I want to shout out my wife, Katie. She has been my rock. She is literally the reason I am here. I won't give away much more of the story, but she's very integral and intricate part of it. So love you, baby. Thank you so much. Shout out my family, my mom, Carly, my sister, Natasha. They've also been there for me and, struggled with me and triumphed with me as well. And just, the whole community, Macalester community in Minnesota and everywhere, one of the best set of people I could ever hope to know. And, just everybody else, on your struggles, I think that one thing I'll say is I always try to inspire people by saying, there's not one path and the path is not linear. You just have to want it. You have to believe and ask for it and take help, so I'll shout out, don't be afraid of asking for help, getting to know people and hearing their stories, because then you can figure out what pieces to take with you to move forward, right? So that's what it's all about.
Right on. How about you, Julie?
Well, thank you, Danny, for having this virtual talk with us in Santa Clara City Library out in California. So yes. We're always honored and humbled with our collaborations, out of state, and really bring forth our stories of immigrants and refugees, and really just putting out there, expanding it with their own community as well, right? Because there's over 50 million immigrants here in the US right now. And so we want to make sure that we go across the whole state to capture all of the story, even if it is just like 5 minutes long or 10 minutes long, to really know that your story empowers other, it inspires, it also heals others as well. And story itself is so powerful when you yourself get to share it by you.
This
And actually, Danny, sorry, if I could just make a couple more shout outs. I want to say thank you to Julie here for being on this journey, for helping curate this book, and it was lovely working with you. Shout out to Taya, the head of Green Card Voices, an amazing human being making such important change in the world. Thank you to Diana Shandy, who was a professor at Macalester, who originally got us together with Green Card Voices in the first interview, and Neha, who was the person who actually did the documentation, the videography, etc. And last but not least, thank you to you, Danny, for hosting this.
Thank you. And just like you said, I wouldn't have met both of you if it wasn't for a comment in social media that led me to a connection and an interview, and now friends in this publishing world. It's great to share the stories of triumph through book form, but that is because we can read out loud and share them once they're done in by reading and sharing it vocally into the community. So once again, I hope to see y'all in the real world. But until then, everybody, thank you for being here. Thank you for watching later. Know that libraries are celebrating stories every day, and also Green Card Voices and their work. So go into the website, get the books, celebrate, share those books. The holidays are coming. Might buy one for a gift. You never know. Until then, have a great evening, and we will see you next time. Peace.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.